Hello, everyone. Ron Zarate here, and you're watching Timing is Everything, and welcome to Episode 9, Intro to I'm Caged In. The first three songs that I have showcased previously, Breathe, Carry On, and Merry Wine, were all written in 1991. I learned a lot in that first year. My first year picking up a guitar, playing a drum set, feeling how heavy a bass guitar can be, and learning what it's like to write a song. As I mentioned, I was constantly playing all hours of every day, listening to as much music as possible to get different perspectives and listening to different genres. So now, let's fast forward to 1992. Remember that year? Things that I remember most about that year were Hurricane Andrew hitting Florida as a Category 5 hurricane, watching the news of mafia boss John Gotti being sentenced to life in prison, and the opening of what was called the largest mall in America, which is called the Mall of America, in which I thought was so cool and wanted to visit until I found out it was in Minnesota, pretty far from where I was at. Boyz II Men were a hot group that year. So were a couple of young guys going by the name of Criss Cross that took the pop culture world by storm with their backwards clothing and came out with a song titled Jump. I'm sure you remember that one. This is the year that I feel changed me as far as a songwriter, where I started to write just a bit differently than most. By this point, all the different bands and different genres that I was listening to were just so fascinating to me. But mostly I was attracted to that new sound, what was being labeled at the time alternative rock. Later to be known as grunge, but that title wasn't given just yet. These bands were popping out left and right, and it was so cool to be in the middle of all this, experiencing it as it happened. Thinking back, I feel so privileged to be alive at the age I was at that specific time. I remember what seemed like every week or two at one point, a new band seemed to be out. People would actually joke how record companies couldn't sign these bands fast enough. So at this point, I bought my first wah pedal, which I still have right here. This guy right here, it's a Dunlop Crybaby model GCB 95. And I believe this pedal was first released in 1982, which was modeled after a 1960s model that was first developed and sold back then. This pedal right here in my hands is 31 years old, and the thing still works flawlessly given the look of it. I've taken it to gigs, rehearsals. It's been in the rain, heat, cold, freezing, the dirt, and the thing is built like a tank, still going. The only thing that is broken is this battery enclosure piece that you see right here, but it's really nothing, and it doesn't affect the function at all. I actually still have it in here. It's just kind of buried in there. I remember when I actually broke it, actually, after like just a couple years owning it, and I just left it like that and never replaced it. Lots of bands I was listening to at the time were using the sound of this pedal, most famously made by Jimi Hendrix in the 60s. Now I'm hearing bands like Mudhoney, Soundgarden, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, and the Smashing Pumpkins, bands like that using it. I thought that the pedal sounded cool and I wanted to hear it live. So I saved up some money and bought the one you see right here. I remember buying it new at a local shop for about $35. I bought other brands since that specific time to this type of pedal, and I have sold or traded all of them and still stick with this one, actually. So in this episode, I'll be showcasing a song that I wrote back in 1992 titled I'm Caged In. Again, I was lucky enough to find the original lyrics on this song and would like to share with you today these right here. So check these out. So this is the same notebook in which I wrote the lyrics to the previous song, Merry Wine. That's my handwriting you see right here. And you can see what I was trying to accomplish. Standard writing of verse, chorus, verse type of a song. I believe I was still about 13 at the time, not quite 14 yet based on the timing of when these lyrics are in this notebook. Kind of hard to remember fully, but I would think this is purely accurate. I would probably turn 14 about a month or so after I wrote this. So, up to this point, as mentioned, I had been listening to a lot of different music. A lot of the rock music I was listening to was written completely different than what I was used to. Growing up with rock bands like the Stones, ZZ Top, Boston, Zeppelin, then getting into the rock bands of the 80s like Def Leppard, Metallica, Poison, Guns N' Roses, and the rock music I was listening to now, alternative rock, was completely different. But I loved it. Listening to this new music opened my mind to different ways on how I could express myself through songwriting. While I didn't know this at the time, it wound up being the main reason on why I listened to all kinds of music, and still do to this day. So I've been practicing in my parents' garage, writing different sounds with this new wah pedal I had, adding distortion and experimenting with different distortion sounds with other new pedals I had, like a Boss DS1, Big Muff. And believe it or not, there was this new pedal that was recently being sold at the time, made by Marshall, called the Shredmaster. I saved money to buy it, and I got one. And unfortunately, I got lost over time. Don't know what happened. So, as Marshall recently released their vintage pedals again, I was lucky enough to get my hands on one brand new again, and it sounds just like I remember. I was also using the distortion directly from my crate amp. It was pretty cool hearing the different tones. I remember being in my garage for hours and hours just messing around with the tone. Now that I look back, this is probably the first time I started to experience with tone and how different amps, pedals, and guitars could change the tone and can actually affect your songwriting. I was borrowing several guitars from different friends at this point and was fascinated on how each one sounded differently. My friend that I described early on a different episode, I was using his guitar mainly. But I was also using a guitar from another friend of mine who lived on the opposite side of the street where I was at, and who had just actually started playing guitar himself. Remember on a previous episode when I described this friend of mine that introduced me to bands like Mudhoney, REM, Mother Love Bone, Nirvana, and when I first heard Love Buzz and other bands on that school bus? What was that friend who started to play guitar as well and was starting something with my friend down the street? So yeah, they were starting their own thing, and I'm telling you, it really seemed like everyone I knew and saw was picking up a guitar and starting a band during this time period. At least in my own circle that I surrounded myself with, as far as friends, school, and what I was watching on MTV. So now into the songwriting. This specific song was written out of frustration in two different ways. One, because of the frustrations of witnessing things at home that really no child, or quite frankly no one, should witness. But unfortunately, it is what it is, and life goes in the direction that it does. And all we can do is take it by the horns and drive it in the direction that we choose to. Secondly, was the frustration of not being able to write a song with this wah pedal. I was trying so hard, and it all sounded like what I was listening to, actually. I wanted the sound of my music to be unique, though, with this new pedal that I had. I just couldn't do it. So one day, I had the pedal plugged in, and it was in the upright position, fully extended upwards. When I turned on my amp and strummed my first chords, I was like, whoa, that's it. I really liked the way that sounded. Then I thought, wait a minute, I'm not using it the way I should. This does not sound at all like what I was hearing on the tapes I had and what I was listening to. I'm not pressing up and down and getting the full effect. The pedal is fully engaged in the upright position and just parked there. So I pressed it downwards and it just didn't sit right with me. So I pressed it to be extended upwards again, and again, I liked the way that sounded. So I was just playing the guitar while the pedal was positioned upwards for the rest of the night, trying to come up with a good riff to my ears at least. After some time, I remember just strumming a power chord and thinking the sound I was getting sounded pretty cool. I was wondering, is this sound good because of the pedal or because of the power chord I'm playing? So I remember turning off the distortion and disengaging the pedal to get a clean tone so I can clearly hear what chord I was playing. But guess what? The guitar was on a dropped D tuning and I had no idea. So I'm playing a power chord even though the guitar is tuned to drop D. It's like, whoa, didn't know that was even possible at the time. So I liked the sound I was getting and decided to open up the song that way. Then I thought the song should hit hard right after I finished playing that part. So I turned off the pedal and hit a drop D chord hard, and I loved the way that sounded coming through the amp. So as I started to put that together, I really started to like the sound of what was being created. I wound up writing a different piece to it, just to get a change in there as a bridge. But the song is pretty much all written with these two pieces. Then came the bass. I pretty much wrote a line over the guitar notes again, with slight changes. I wanted to hear the bass hit hard when I disengaged that wah pedal and played that hard drop D chord. I was still experimenting with bass and felt like each song I wrote, I was branching out a bit more. I was listening to a lot of bass lines from Rush, The Who, bands like that, get ideas for bass at the time. When it came down to the drums, I tried a different approach. I wanted to showcase the guitars, so I really fell in love with the sound. So rather than putting out a full-out drum line, I just decided to do a snare piece over the verse. I felt it worked for what I wanted to hear. Then in the chorus, I would come in a bit harder. To me, this captured something unique, and that is what I was trying to capture overall. Plus, to me, it enhanced the aggression of the lyrics. So as I sat and I wrote the lyrics over one of those days, the song is written lyrically in 2 points of views, which I mentioned earlier. My parents' issues with the divorce and how that was affecting me at the time, and my first attempt at writing a first song with the wah pedal. So as you hear the lyrics, I'm speaking of both. Sometimes even in the same sentence, it means both things to me. When it comes to the chorus, and I say, I'm caged in, so here's an example, that describes the feeling of both points of view to me. Feeling caged in because of my anger towards my parents and the behavior towards myself and my sisters at the time, and feeling caged in because I couldn't get a lick out on the wah pedal. I feel the lyrics that I wrote capture my frustrations perfectly. So this is how and why I settled on these lyrics. So I would like to play a sample of this song. What you're going to hear is a guitar actually tuned to a drop D tuning. It also will have some drums and some vocals. I had a bass line written, but no bass to record it with at the time, so you won't be able to hear that. The guitar was recorded with the same guitar I was using at the time and spoke of before, my trusty electric Washburn. The drums you hear on this tape are the same drums, my CB Max 5 piece set that I had. So here's a 4-track sample of the song titled, I'm Caged In. So another old recording that takes me back. Again, I've decided to keep it as close to the original as possible. I've taken this song and re-recorded using everything I know today, but still trying to keep the original vibe. This is the fourth song of my first series of 12 songs that formed my youth from the ages of 13 to 16 within this first chapter. I welcome you to let me know what you think in the comments, and I thank you for the time spent listening to the story. It means a lot to me. Looking back, it fascinates me that after 1 year or so of playing consistently to this point, I was able to write this song already. Hearing it takes me back and gives me that nostalgic feeling of the music I was surrounding myself with every day during that time period. Boy, do I miss it. Please provide any feedback you may have, as I would really love to hear it. Please be sure to like and subscribe to stay updated on new videos and content as my musical journey through YouTube continues to get published. And lastly, please continue to stay tuned for episode 10, where I'll be showcasing the actual song written with today's gear, I'm Caged In. Thanks for watching.
2, 3, 4.